Football's rule makers, IFAB, have rejected a call to introduce temporary concussion substitutes at their annual general meeting today, opting instead to extend a trial of permanent concussion substitutions. The PFA, brain injury groups and medical experts were among signatories to a letter advocating temporary substitutions. Let's bring in Luke Griggs from the Brain Injury Association. Headway, thanks for joining us. Good afternoon. What's your reaction to IFAB's decision?
Well, I think that decision is as frustrating as it is confusing, quite honestly. I mean, this is something that Headway has been calling for many years, and we were a signatory to this letter, which is signed by some of the leading authorities in concussion, whether from a research point of view, from a medical point of view, from a personal perspective, in terms of some of the signatories. And yet again, it's that kind of evidence, that kind of expertise is simply being ignored.
IFAB say they chose to extend the trial of permanent subs to, quote, form a scientifically valid decision. I guess you think they've had time to do that already?
Well, I think, you know, if I was one of the doctors adding my name to this, if one of the leading researchers, internationally renowned individuals who have spent their careers saying this and developing this kind of research, I think I'd have a right to be slightly confused and offended by that concept. The evidence is there. What I'm struggling to understand, what more they expect to learn from extending the trial to 2023, the end of 2023. I don't see what else they're going to learn from this. It's quite bewildering.
We've heard comments that on-field concussion assessments are problematic. What can happen if a concussed player plays on?
Well, the real risk is if you're concussed. Now, concussion is a mild traumatic brain injury, and I think if you get people thinking about it being an injury to your brain, it might make people think about just how serious it can possibly be. The real risk is if you sustain another blow to the head when concussed, it can exacerbate that initial injury and cause significant harm, whether it's further bruising or potentially even bleeding to the brain, and it can really make for some long-term implications. So it's vital to make sure you rest and you remove yourself from any potential risk of contact when you've had a concussion. But making that diagnosis is very, very difficult, particularly in a 2 to 3 minute window, in the cauldron of a football pitch with that red hot atmosphere where you've got 50,000 people, still singing and wanting that game to carry on. And, making yourself heard for the physio is a hard enough job, let alone actually conducting that kind of assessment in such a short period of time. Then in the Premier League, if you bring in the foreign language kind of problem, if they've got an Italian player or a German player who doesn't speak English and you're trying to conduct that kind of assessment, it's just not going to happen. It's very, very difficult, which is why we think that should happen in the quiet confines of a dressing room with a longer period to assess the player.
There's a lot of talk about the importance of independent oversight. In your view, what form should that take?
Well, we've always said that we recognise the incredibly difficult job that club medics have. Not only to actually conduct the assessment themselves, but they are under pressure to make that right snap decision. And we think that actually by introducing independent medics to actually oversee the assessment process, again, in the quiet confines of the dressing room or the changing rooms, would actually be a benefit to those medical professionals that do a very, very difficult job in difficult conditions.
The PFA have backed the campaign. English football will have, as I've said, permanent concussion subs again next year. In the light of today's decision from IFAB, what else can the English game do in the meantime, in the shortish term, to protect players as best we can?
Well, look, we've seen the fact that at the time when permanent concussion substitutes were introduced, we said it would be ineffective. It's proved to be ineffective. There were so many incidents last season. Robert Koch for Leeds United springs to mind when he was allowed to continue because temporary concussion substitutes weren't an option. And 20-odd minutes later, he presented symptoms and had to be removed from the pitch. So we know that permanent concussion substitutes are not the answer. I think what we really want from the English game, from the PFA, from the FA, from the Premier League, is to continue to put pressure on IFAB, on UEFA, on FIFA, to make sure that they finally take action, because you've got another missed opportunity, another year, a World Cup year, another domestic season when nothing is going to change and players are going to continue to be put under unnecessary risk. So we need that pressure to be put on the international lawmakers.
Luke Griggs, I feel your frustration. Thank you.